we're going to shade the base of all of the tiny leaves with the mix that we've made, listed in your pattern. And the beauty about this project is that it doesn't matter if I go off the edge. So see how if I go right off the edge, so you can just do a nice quick shading. None of this off the edge is going to matter because we're painting all around here black afterwards. So that is not going to matter. So I've dried the leaves that I shaded, and now I'm going to come up the middle. So we'll come up the middle of each leaf, and again, it doesn't matter if I go off the edge. That's the beauty of this project. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do the very same thing on the darker leaves. I'm just going to darken our mix as we instructed. I've mixed a highlight color to dry brush on our leaves. Now I'm going to use that same highlight mix on the large ones as well as the little ones. Just nice and softly. I'm using my lunar blender to dry brush this in. Stronger towards the outer edge on one side of our leaves. Let's see, I'll do it on there. And then more towards the middle of the leaf. So towards the outer, towards the middle. I can use my 1/4 inch on the bigger leaves. So I'll use, and I like to use the brushes that are kind of wrecked. And then more to the middle on this side. So we're getting our dry brush on there, and then once we get our dry brush on there, we're going to take our liner and I have mixed a little bit darker shading color. So with our black green, and this we're going to do veins, and we're also going to strengthen our shading up. So once you've got all your dry brushing done, I've only done a few leaves here, but we thin it down, and I'll add a nice thin down vein. Your whole plan is not to completely go right to the outer edge. So it's down the middle, and again, you can see how it didn't matter my shading. I was able to nice and loosely do a quick shading. Doesn't matter if I get out over the outer edge because we are going to be putting the black out there, so that's going to clean up all of our edges. So you see how this makes a nice difference on these pieces. I'll give it a quick dry, and then I'm going to show you how I'm going to strengthen up my shading. So I will come in here and just, with a little of that darkened color for shading, strengthen those up. I'm not going to bother with down the middle of the vein on these ones. It's just more of next to the piece. And you can choose a couple of spots. So like what I'm meaning is just in a little dent on the odd leaf. I haven't got my veins on this one or my dry brushing, so I shouldn't be doing that. Just walk that up a bit and pick a spot. So I'm going to pick there, shade a little, and then maybe in there in that little dent. Choose the little dents, they kind of make it nice. So you see how that has strengthened up all of the shading in those areas. I guess I did a couple that were out of the camera view. That sounds about right. So nice and soft, walk it out. And remember that we are going to be cleaning up edges when we bring the black in later on. Might not make sense to you now, but it's just you don't have to spend so much time being so overly careful about your shading at this point in time. All right, so here we go. I've done all the dry brushing and added my veins. So I'm going to take my highlight color that I dry brushed and come along and add a little soft float along the outer edge of some of the leaves. So it's just going to be along the outer edge of some of the leaves. I'm going to shade the larger white flower and I'm going to use my 5/8. I'm shading in sand gray. I want to walk it out and I'll use my mop. I'll shade the little petals in behind. Walk that out. And then again, you're going to mop as you go, as you feel you need to. That mop will soften any lines that you happen to feel you're leaving behind. Now we are strengthening the shading, so you're not too concerned about still seeing transfer lines. When we do the white at the outer edges, you may have to go back a couple of times and do those. Now if you feel you'd like to switch out to a smaller brush for inside, you can do that, but this just stops from having to really use a bit more of the walking out. So lean to the water side of the brush as you come out with your, for walking out those shadows. Now I do have just those tiny spots in there, and I will switch to my 3/8 and shade in those little petals. And we'll shade along like that. And the last there. I'll dry that, and then we're going to do a little dry brushing if you feel you need it. So you can use your 1/4 inch or 3/8, whichever you've got handy, lunar blender. And I'll just come in here and I'll use that, and I'll just dry brush. Just a nice little circular motion, but do you see how that pulls out that excess color? So where I might like it to creep up a little bit higher, I just, using the brush in a bit of a circular motion, flat. I'm not up on the tip, I'm flat. There. So we do that, and then we're going to come back and we're going to float with the Snow White along the outer edges. Now, I can use my 1/4 inch for the tiny areas, tiny petals, and I'll use my 3/8 on my bigger petals. Now you will end up having to do these twice, at least twice. So don't continue going over and over them. Don't worry about that. Just come along. We did put a coat of white paint over top of these to subdue them, but we still needed to see where they were. So we want to make sure that as we come along, we're putting a nice white float there, and we will come back. And the second coat, when you do it again, will grab more as well. So nice and soft, float those edges on those petals. I'll come in along the edge of the leaves. Now if you brought leaf color over onto your flower, you could, see I've got some there too. I could have taken my fix-it brush and gone in there and kind of removed that, but you know, that didn't happen. Now we're not going to do the centers to our flowers right now. We're going to do these same steps to all of the white ones. So once we've got that on there, I'm going to give it a quick bit of a dry, and we're going to strengthen our shading. Like I say, I'm going to come back, I'm going to float that white again to highlight. And sometimes I'll even use my liner just to go along the edge and add a little bit more highlight. But we've mixed a little bit of neutral gray and graphite. So it's quite a dark shading. So this is going to be, and I don't want it to be a heavy-duty float. We're not going to be walking it out tons or anything like that. Blend it well on your palette. I'm in here with my side load on my 3/8. And you're coming into your dark areas where we had the sand gray, but we're not walking it out like we did with the sand gray. And when I'm floating along, quite often I'll do a little bit of a wiggle as I float, just to give it a little bit of a ruffled petal kind of appearance. But you can see how that's defining my lines a bit more, and what it's also doing is helping us kind of hide some of that. Now see, I didn't blend it as much there, and it's a little stronger than I want, so I'll give that a blot. Blend a bit more on my palette. So there are the strengthened shadows. And the last step for this video will be our little tiny thinned veins. And we're going to do those with thinned. Now we are floating some, we're going to tint these with plum suede after we're completely happy with our white. But, so I'll come back with that on a video later. But do you see these nice thinned? We're not going too crazy here. Make sure you're pulling these the direction that your petals go. And we're not going to go crazy. We don't need a ton of them. It just does help to pull your eyes as well. And this is, I've really thinned my neutral gray. So that they're just sheer. Okay, so that helps to give us the look that our petals are going the direction we want. And again, I'll go back several times with my Snow White until I'm happy with how strong it is. You can go in there and do that with your, brain freeze here, with your liner along the edges, just to crisp those up a bit if you feel you just can't get that to go away. But I think you will be happy after a couple of floats. Alrighty, so that's where we're going with our white flowers. I've gone in and I've used my liner and I floated my colors that I wanted. And now I'm going to float a little bit of there we go, frosted plum. And I just found out that frosted plum has been discontinued. Now I really like this color and I love how it works in this design. So we are using it still, and I am going to see what I can do to kind of make a nice match for this. So I'm just tinting it by floating a little highlight very thin here and there with the frosted plum on my white. So it's nice and soft. Float these with our frosted plum. It's kind of got a bit of blush pink and a little bit of a purple in there. Now I've put a fair bit on there because I just love it. I really like what it does for the picture. So there's my frosted plum. And I'm going to do the very same thing with those little tiny cluster of flowers that we have. So we will float those with the sand gray, same as we did for the others. So when I'm floating these, of course, with the sand gray, you always want to start underneath the other petal, come to the center, walk yourself up. If I'm going to choose this petal to be underneath, and then the guy who's left on top will still just do a little from the center outwards. These are small enough that I won't have to go in and walk them out. But I'll do those. I'll dry like we did before. I'm just going to do one so you can see, but it's going to be the very same. the fact that they're so tiny, they don't take too long to do. And it's going to be the same thing, float. I should be using my 1/4 inch for this, my darker. Strengthening of my shadows. And then I'm going to pull in my thinned neutral gray lines. Now, of course, these have a little bit of a different look because this is a different little flower. So we'll do that, try that, and I'm going to float my highlight of white, again, Snow White. This will take a couple of coats. And remember, when it's off the edge and it's onto the black background, you're not so worried about it. Because it's going to get covered with black, so you don't have to be so delicate there. I'll dry that, and it's when I come with my frosted plum. If you can't get frosted plum, I'm actually going to recommend that you take your blush pink, and with a little drop of Poetic Plum in there, I think will do the trick. Just a touch of Poetic Plum into the blush, and I think that'll give you very close. If it's not, maybe even a little touch of neutral gray, because this is the frosted plum has got a bit of a gray plum to it. It's not bright pinky. But now when I float my tint on these flowers, I'm going to be, I'm going to be messy. But I don't care about that. I'm trying to work under the camera and it's not being so successful with me. So this tint, I'm basically going all the way. You know how on the other ones it was a little kiss here and there? This one, I want it to be all along the outer petals. So it's going to have a lot more of this pinky look for these flowers. What a mess I'm making here. I'm going to have to raise the camera a bit there because I just can't get under that. I hope it's still allowing you to see, but it's easier to paint when I'm not underneath that camera. This one's, there we go. See, there's the beauty of the black's going to take care of that for me. There we go. So you see how this flower, I'll stop that camera from bouncing on you. See how this flower has a little bit of a different look, even though it's done the very same way. One of these petals, I guess we'll go with this one, needs to have some pink coming down. And there we go. Alrighty. I'm going to pull in my stems, or stamens, pardon me, with thinned camel. So we'll just thin some camel, and I will pull them in. You want some short ones and some long ones. If you go over your front part, you can go back in after. And then I'm going to take and I'm going to dab in with the tip of my liner a little camel. Then I'm going to pick up sand, dab in a bit of sand, followed by a little bit of light buttermilk. We want these to be random, not look like polka dots, nice and loose. We'll do that in all of our flowers. And then we're going to switch over to the little pink flowers. Now the little pink flowers, I'm going to use same colors. I'm going to use my 0 round. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to dab in the little pollen dots. And we'll just go like that. And I'm going to take sand, same colors. And follow again with light buttermilk. Now you can keep these tighter if you want or have them loose. All right, so that's how we're going to add our pollen. Now we're going to shade on the pink flowers very much like what we did on the white flowers. Using our 5/8, walking it out, mopping it to soften. And repeat your way around. Once we've shaded all of the petals, we will dry it, and if we need to bring our shading out further, we will use our 1/4 inch lunar blender or whatever you'd like to dry brush with, and dry brush. I'm going to make this petal here a flipped over petal. So whenever you do that, you shade under your flip. And I'll just carry on with the guy in the back so that he can dry. And we're going to end up with that trouble that I had earlier. And this is going to be another curled flip petal. I love those petals. And that's the bottom of that petal that curls up. Soften with my mop. This petal along the bottom. Again, because it's curled up. And we will be dry brushing in here to bring that up as well. Walk it up. And then I will shade along the back of this petal that's flipped. There we go. Using a little bit bigger than I should be. and we'll just walk those out nice and far. All right, so I'll dry that and we'll give it a little dry brush. The heat gun does a nice quick job for us. And I'm just grabbing my lunar blender and I will nice and softly dry brush up. Create the look that these petals have a bigger shadow coming out further. There, nice and soft. And then what we're going to do is we're going to float our highlight along our outer edges. Now, it's going to be just like the white was. When we were floating our white, it's never quite solid enough at the edges of our petals, so we will float it a few times. So we'll go back until we have the strength. Now here, when I'm against the white, which is going to be black, see how quick I can do that? I don't care if I stay right on the edge. That just, here's the flip now. Nice and soft. Remember, don't press hard. And that baby blush is such a soft, beautiful color. And you see how it just lifts the edge of the petal. Nice and soft. So we will continue the rest of our petals. We're going to start strengthening our shading using our mix of 2 parts black plum to 1 part frosted plum. So I'm going to start right here in the middle. Now I'm only using my 3/8 and I could be using larger for in the center here. Flip it around. Now when you're strengthening a shadow, you don't have to do it the same strength or width everywhere. So by that I mean, let's say I'm going to come in here. Nice and strong, just a little bit, that camera jobby again, here, and then stronger again here. There are certain areas that we would like the shadow to increase. And that's going to make it look like there's more of a swell out of that petal. Now I will come back and possibly dry brush a little bit, depending on how much stronger I want my shadow to come out. And if I painted this, which I will be, the same flower on the other side, it may not have the same places shaded as strong. I may have dry brushed or walked out my shadow in the beginning a little bit further. So every flower is going to depend on what you've got as a base for that one. And I never end up with two looking the same. So you see the strength that this is adding to this. It is cupping it more, allowing these curves. And I can just, do you see how I can slide, like say here too, I can slide my shadow in a bit of a chisel line, and that'll give the illusion that there's a bit of petals there. I'm just going to pull a little bit up there as well. A little more along the bottom. And this frosted plum is the color that we are going to tint on a few leaves. So while I'm in here right now, even over onto the leaves that are with the white flower, and that really sets a nice tone on our leaves as well. Nice and soft, and again, I still have to go back and strengthen up some of my float, my highlight float on the edge of some of my petals. Right here, so I can see through. So it's a lot of back and forth, a little play in here and a little play in there. But every little bit that you do makes a difference. And again, I talked about how we can come in here with our liner and the baby blush. Just to run that along the edge of the petal. Here and there. Again, don't outline the petals, but just crisp them up with a little line here and there, if that makes sense. So that's looking better. I do a lot of smudging with my finger as well. But that looks pretty good. It's looking like he is going to be ready for a few. And what I'm going to use is I'm going to thin down some of the frosted plum. And I'll just pull up a few lines, just like we did with the neutral gray. and make sure you're going the direction that the petal is going. And that makes a softness to the flower as well. All right, so this guy's pretty much ready for his center. I just want to show you how, now you're going to just go around the whole thing with black, but this is why we talked about how we didn't have to be careful with our shading. Now we just come in and base coat around everything. Now you may have to go back in some places and do second coats, but it's no biggie. You can go to a small brush. Some people will like to outline all of their pieces. We're going to apply these buds on top after, so that's why I'm blacking over them. So all of this will have the black painted, and we clean up the edges to all of our leaves, and everything ends up coming up nice and crisp. So we will go through and do that to the entire piece. We're going to start with our buds. I'm using a number 4 filbert. I'm going to double load my filbert in plum suede and sand gray. Flatten it on the palette to get the colors to start to blend. Then I'm going to tip and reload the light side of my brush, which is sand gray, into snow white. So now my brush is what I'm going to call triple loaded. I'm going to start on the side of the brush and pull in the top bud. He's just a baby. Then I'm going to pull, I'll start at the bottom, and I'm going to add a second part up there. They kind of look like pussy willows almost. Reload, work those, pick up the snow white, pardon me. And now for this one here, I'm going to press and slide and press and slide. So they are basically overlapping each other. I can put this guy in from the bottom, then overlap, blend, side load again, and then again I'll turn so that my dark is this way, then my light will overlap again. And I'm going to put another bit of a petal here because the two of them are starting to look like a butterfly. Put a petal in here, another one. Put a petal here. You can see this one's got a couple. Another overlapper. Now we've got a gap in the middle here, so let's just put a bit of a petal in there. They kind of end up having the look of a lilac bush. That's what we're going to be doing for these buds. If you can see through them in a few places, because we've got them against the black, That's all fine. So I'll just move over here. Where am I in the camera? There we are. And I will add the other buds. Reload as I'm running out of steam there. There we go. So we will continue and add the rest of these buds in here. I'll come back and put a little bit of green stemming when we're done. I've gone through and I've finished my buds, so I'm going to come in here now and add some green like we talked about. So I'm just grabbing off my palette, but if I was just mixing out of what's in there, would be, I think I'd just go with aloe. And I'm just pulling in a few stems. Just to connect, give a little bit of a branch of these pretty little buds, whichever they are.